PFLAG friends, please take your seats. The program will begin shortly.
one on the left is great.
For 50 years, PFLAG has been leading with love. What started as a letter to the editor from one mother of a gay son led to a march with parent and child side by side. They brought together a meeting of parents and families with their lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer loved ones. And that meeting birthed a global movement of millions working to create a caring, just, and affirming world for LGBTQ plus people and those who love them. When AIDS ravaged a generation, PFLAG families appealed to elected officials to feel their heartache and loss. Before there were GSAs in schools, a PFLAG family fought for and won Title IX protections for LGBTQ plus students. When it was still the gay rights movement, PFLAG included transgender and bisexual people in our mission. And when the governor of Texas threatened parents of transgender children, PFLAG brought that governor to court. For 50 years, PFLAG has connected LGBTQ plus people with community, parents and families with support, and allies with education and resources to advocate for justice and equity. Love is at the center of everything we do. Let's ensure that every LGBTQ plus person is safe, celebrated, empowered, and loved for the next 50 years and beyond. Visit pflag.org/50 years to learn more.
Please welcome Brian Bond, CEO of PFLAG National, and Dr. Jill Biden, First Lady of the United States.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Learning with Love, the 2023 PFLAG National Convention. My name is Brian Bond. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of PFLAG National. I'm so glad to be here in Washington and so grateful for you all being here with us, especially as we close out PFLAG's 50th anniversary year. As you know, we are living in extremely challenging times right now, here at home and around the world. But I see moments every day of selflessness and bravery, and all along the way, I get to meet incredible people, including all of you in this room, and a very special guest today. In my humble opinion, President Biden has been a true champion and ally to the LGBTQ+ community, not just in words, but in actions. The Biden-Harris administration has done so much for this community from day one. That ethos has permeated every department and agency of the federal government, and I am grateful for the president's leadership. There is one person in particular who, as her team knows, holds a special place in my heart since my time in the Obama-Biden administration. She is a military mom, a grandmother, a best-selling author, and a community college educator. I had the pleasure of first meeting and working around her when she served as the Second Lady of the United States. It was then that I had the opportunity to see firsthand her warmth, her caring, and her kindness. Dr. Biden is one of, I'm gonna cry, sorry. Sorry, it's very PFLAG-ish. Dr. Biden is one of the most authentic individuals you will ever meet, whether it's a state dinner or a picnic, whether with friends or heads of state. She is genuine and a true ally to our community. Please join me in welcoming the First Lady of the United States, Dr. Jill Biden.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Please. Thank you. Gosh, he's going to have me crying now. So thank you, Brian, honestly, for that beautiful introduction. And I'm so grateful for his friendship. And he's right, it has been for many, many years. And several years ago, when he was looking for his next step, he had every opportunity at his fingertips. But, he chose to make a difference by leading PFLAG, because he realized that, there's no more fundamental fight than the fight to be our authentic selves and love who we love. And Brian, somewhere out there, is a boy growing up in a small rural town in Missouri. He's gay, and because of your work, he's able to find the love and support he needs and become anything he wants to be. And maybe he too will go on to improve the lives of so many more. And to the hundreds of PFLAG members with us today, thank you for being a part of this powerful community. Thank you for leading with love. Sometimes it's the smallest decisions that change the course of history. The decision to dump tea off the side of ships in the Boston Harbor. The decision to refuse to sit in the back of the bus. Yes. The decision to say enough is enough after repeated raids at a New York City gay bar. In 1972, Jean Manford decided to write a letter to the editor. The week before her 1-year-old son, Morty, had been beaten for anti-gay bias in New York City, while other people just stood by and watched. Jean, as most people would be, was scared and heartbroken and livid. I am proud of my son, Morty Manford, she wrote. In those 8 words, Jean came out to the world and gave other parents the space to do the same. It was a courageous love, it was a love letter from a mom who just wanted her son to be safe and to enjoy the same rights and respect as any other human being. 2 months later, Jean would walk alongside Morty in New York City's famous Christopher Street Liberation Day March, holding a sign urging parents to unite in support of their gay sons and daughters. Small decisions, simple acts of protest that launched a movement. But to Jean, this wasn't revolutionary. Loving your child unconditionally, wanting them to be safe, wanting them to find love, wanting to live in a world where they can be anything they want to be, and that they can have the opportunity that their peers have. To the world in the 1970s, this was radical. Yet the overwhelming outpouring of support following Jean's small acts of activism led her to start hosting meetings to connect with other parents and families and friends. And the rest is your history. PFLAG is living proof that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. And look at that small group now. You provide a safe haven, a home for so many children who are struggling against a world that is rarely compassionate and too often violent and unkind. PFLAG creates a space for parents, families, and friends to become loving allies. At its core, PFLAG is about family, and family is love. I am here today to applaud your 50 years of service and advocacy. And I want to ask you to keep going. Continue to summon Jean's courage, because the world needs these small acts of love now more than ever. For the trans person who feels seen when we use the right pronouns. For the gay or lesbian teen kicked out of his or her home who is searching for refuge. For the bisexual student who wants to see herself reflected in the book she can borrow from her school library. In America, my friends, we do not ban books. Remember what Jean showed us, that change starts with one small step, that worldwide movements can begin with the smallest of actions. Continue bringing that courage back to the communities once this weekend is over. And know that my husband, President Biden, is a partner in your work. He is doing everything in his power to protect LGBTQ kids and support families. He's working to combat the dangerous, cruel practice of conversion therapy. His administration launched a crisis hotline for young people. He's committing more resources to address youth homelessness. And just a few months ago, we hosted, and maybe some of you were there, the largest Pride Month celebration ever held at the White House. From today's perspective, it's easy to forget what a revolutionary concept it was that parents, families, and friends would organize in support of their lesbian and gay children. But you were the first. You made the movement. You changed our culture along with the course of history. And you've grown into the largest organization in the world dedicated to supporting, educating, and advocating for LGBTQ individuals and their loved ones. You are fighting unjust state laws and local school district policies that censor history. You are bringing cases to courts on behalf of families across this country. You give hope to advocates everywhere, those who feel like their one voice is not enough. Your example shows them that real change comes from real people, with a simple act of protest, with a match that lights a fire and inspires a movement. Thank you for making lasting change, for leading with love. I'm honored to mark 50 years with all of you, and I'm so grateful that future generations of children will have you in the corner for the next 50. Thank you. Love you. God bless you. Thank you.
I can figure out how my binder works. Yay! How was that? Yeah. We want Dr. Biden back. We love her. Thank you, Dr. Biden. Okay, it's really hard to follow that. I see a lot of bathroom breaks happening as I start. I've been CEO of PFLAG National for almost 5 years now, and I have to say it has been the honor of my life. I want to give a quick thanks and thank you to the PFLAG National Board of Directors. If they could stand if able, please do so. As well as our Volunteer Regional Directors Council. Again, if you could stand if able to do so. Thank you for all of your hard work that you do in support of PFLAG's mission and vision. I'm grateful and humbled to work with each and every one of you every day. Thank you so much. And Susan, thank you for your leadership as chair of our board. I want to thank all of the PFLAG chapter leaders that are here and chapter and national members for everything you do every single day to help create a caring, just, and affirming world for LGBTQ plus people and those who love them. That is the work of PFLAG, and we are absolutely doing this work together. This has been a year of celebration, 50 years of purpose, action, and service. Yet, with so much going on around us, it's sometimes hard to celebrate. But that meeting in a basement of a Methodist church 50 years ago has led us to this moment. I know I'm stating the obvious, but we are under siege. The world seems on fire, and we are being tested. But that being said, I know that every one of us, we are resilient and always leading with love. And I need to make this abundantly clear. People should not mistake PFLAG love as a sign of weakness. No. PFLAG love is a courageous love. It moves us to action and drives us to persist, even when the path before us is difficult. Our work is critical. Your voices matter. Many of you brought your voices to Capitol Hill yesterday to make a difference with your legislators. And whether you were greeted with warmth or challenged with questions or anything in between, never doubt that they will continue to think about you and your story long after you've left their office. Legislatively, this has been one of the worst years on record. So bad, in fact, that as most of you know, PFLAG, for the first time in our 50-year history, is now serving as a plaintiff in 4 different lawsuits across the country. Texas, Missouri, and we announced on Coming Out Day last week, North Carolina, to fight back against bans on medically necessary health care for trans kids. Socially, this has been one of the worst years on record, with anti-Semitism, xenophobia, racism, and anti-LGBTQ plus rhetoric on the rise, leading to so much real-world harm and violence. Our families are being targeted. LGBTQ plus people, our beloved family members, neighbors, and friends, are being targeted by an organized and well-funded effort to share misinformation and purposeful disinformation, and it's harmful to the people we love. We're seeing continuing efforts to force teachers to out their students. They are trying to censor us, erase us, and prohibit our access to public facilities. And these things are happening everywhere, not just a red state thing or a blue state thing. This is an America thing. I do see a glimmer of hope, however. About a year ago, I was in Mississippi for PFLAG Jackson for a Pride event to show support to a community in a state that denies our very existence. What I saw there was a fenced-in area with security, with weapons, hecklers outside. But we had a strong and vibrant community there that said it would not be erased. I'm so proud of that PFLAG chapter and our community doing what you all do every single day in support of our mission. Through all this, I have seen PFLAGers lead and fight back with passion and sometimes at very real personal risks. I have sat in multiple courtrooms over the past year in Texas, in Missouri, listening to parents speak out on behalf of their kids to try to stop bad laws from going into effect. I have watched parents take the stand and swear to tell the truth. And that truth is that they have just one job, to keep their LGBTQ plus kids safe. I have seen our members, parents, grandparents, teachers, and librarians and allies and LGBTQ plus people speaking out at contentious school board and library board meetings to prevent books and inclusive curriculum from being removed from shelves in classrooms. This work is important, and we have no choice but to double down and move forward because, after all, we have just one job, just one, to keep our community and LGBTQ plus kids safe. We're doubling down and expanding our staff to meet this demand. And PFLAG chapters, the PFLAG chapter network has grown exponentially with 36 new chapters just in the last year alone. Mostly in communities where PFLAG may very well be the only source of support and community affirmation. PFLAG chapters in places like Enid, Oklahoma, South Pines and Apex, North Carolina, Sedalia, Missouri, Hendersonville, Tennessee, Gainesville, Georgia, Clinton and Storm Lake, Iowa, Mesquite, Texas, Anderson, South Carolina, Lander, Wyoming, and Safety Harbor, Florida. How appropriate. Safety Harbor. We need safe harbors right now. And as PFLAGers, you are building those welcoming and inclusive spaces in your own communities. That is what PFLAG is all about. That is why 50 years later, we are still here. Last week, I was in Missouri, my home state, marching with PFLAG Cape Girardeau in the Southeast Missouri State University homecoming parade. Not a pride parade, mind you. The State University's homecoming parade in one of the most conservative parts of the state. It was a remarkable experience. In the delegation, PFLAG delegation, this queer teen, maybe 15, 16 years old, and they were twirling a pride flag. And there with them was their PFLAG dad, marching right beside them, carrying the PFLAG banner. I saw such pride and tenacity in this kid. I saw hope. Now, to be honest, I was candidly a little bit worried. Every time I'd hear a noise, but then I'd see this dad and this kid. They were just out there. They were present. You could see on some of the young moms' faces as we'd go by in the crowd. Now, they might not have known what PFLAG is, but they for sure saw our flags. And they might not have a queer kid, but they just didn't want to see any kids hurt. And so they clapped. And they don't want to see any kid picked on. And there were tailgaters, college kids, fraternities and sororities. And when we went through fraternity row, again, applauses. And I think it says something. If we can take politics out of it and keep things on a human level, people don't want to see kids hurt and picked on. This is why your stories and your voices matter. because those stories can reach those moms and dads, these students in fraternities and sororities, and tailgaters in Missouri and Mississippi. A person-to-person conversation or interaction, one at a time. We can create lasting change. I truly believe that. Our founder, Gene Manford, did that. Adele Starr, our first national president, did that. You all embody their legacies to make this a more equitable, inclusive, and affirming world. Please keep doing what you're doing. Please know you have the gratitude of many. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for all you do. Oh, I'm not done. This might be where you want to sneak out. Sorry, just kidding. No, we've got, I do have a few more things to go through, and we've got a great program for you, so please stay where you are. Now, before we dive into the first plenary, today, I have some awards to give out. First up, our first PFLAG National Chapter Award. As I shared earlier this year, for the first time, PFLAG is a plaintiff in some lawsuits, suing states to protect trans kids. 2 of those lawsuits are in Texas. Yes, PFLAG versus Abbott might be my 3 favorite words. We brought that case to protect loving parents from being investigated for child abuse. And we're also suing to stop SB 14, which prevents trans kids and their families from accessing medically necessary care. Our chapters in Texas have been doing incredible work in the face of fear and harm. They have been supporting families and expanding their membership by the droves. In fact, since that lawsuit started, we have more than doubled our membership in the state of Texas. This is because of the protection that PFLAG provides and the support and work done by all of our local chapters. One of those chapters, PFLAG Georgetown from our southern region, is PFLAG Georgetown from our southern region. In a time of tension and fear, with many families fleeing the state, a small group of passionate folks in Georgetown chose to start a new PFLAG chapter as an opportunity to provide support and visibility where little to none existed previously. Their activities have been diverse and robust, from establishing a monthly support group meeting at their local library to welcoming guest speakers on legislative advocacy. The chapter introduced a second monthly support group meeting specifically for families with trans kids. Due to the climate, they can't advertise these meetings, but word of mouth has spread quickly. The chapter also holds LGBTQ plus book club meetings at a local bookstore. So, for establishing themselves as a new chapter to provide much needed visibility and support, I'm proud to present this chapter award to PFLAG Georgetown.
Thank you. So we're from Texas, y'all. And you know we're in the belly of the beast. And you've heard today just what we're facing. Families who are fighting for their kids to get their medical care. I listened to moms who are in tears because their 16-year-old kid has just found out that they can't stay on the hormones they've been taking for a couple of years. We're fighting against being investigated. We have friends that have left the state because they are afraid that they are going to be investigated and called child abusers. We have stood together at the state capitol and heard our children called the spawn of Satan. This is what it's like in Texas. But we have hope. because the people of Texas are actually very welcoming. And what we've found with starting our new PFLAG chapter is that folks are responding beautifully. We have a booth at the local farmers market once a month, and we watch folks walk past us and then do a double take, and they come back and they say, "Wow, in Georgetown?" Yeah, in Georgetown. So we've got this wonderful community that is actually very welcoming, but the politicians don't know that yet. So we're showing them. And PFLAG has allowed that to happen, has had our back each step of the way. And we are able to make a difference, and we're able to make a difference because we have the support of everybody in this room. And for that, those of us who are in Texas, who are struggling every day, are grateful from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you so much.
Our second and final award for the day is a service award. As many of you know, Jean Marie Nevada spent 17 years at PFLAG National and recently made a decision to move onto a new opportunity. During her time at PFLAG National, the work she did through the many programs she created and worked on, Straight for Equality, PFLAG Academy Online, and Something to Talk About Live, touched so many people and changed so many lives. I'm proud to present this PFLAG National Service Award to Jean Marie Nevada.
I didn't write a speech. After all the speeches, Brian just said I have to give a speech. The first time I saw PFLAG, I was 17 years old, and I was living in Beaverton, Oregon. And I saw PFLAG in the Pride Parade, and I said to my friend, "Could you imagine if my parents did that?" Eventually, my parents did do that. So, PFLAG has changed my life in ways that I can't even imagine. I never thought there would be a way that I could do the things that I loved and be part of what I think is probably one of the most important organizations in civil rights history. And to know that I just got to be a little tiny part of it, and to get to meet so many of you and to have so many of you make me who I am today, I will never, ever forget. I have to tell you, in my new role, I love what I do, but the thing that always makes me very happy is when people introduce me, when I get introduced for something, they say, "She spent 17 years at PFLAG," and before I even say a word, people start applauding. And that makes me very proud. I will always be PFLAG proud. This will always be my family. And I hope that we will see each other a whole lot more. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean Marie. One of the programs that Jean Marie was heavily involved with is our Read with Love program, our response to the onslaught of book bans and bans on accurate and inclusive curricula in the classroom that we are seeing in every state across the country. This orchestrated attempt to prevent people of all ages from accessing inclusive books and content, censoring not just stories, but the identities of people of color and LGBTQ plus people, is well-funded and not new. It is deeply rooted in racism anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and an anti-LGBTQ plus sentiment and action. And PFLAGers have been fighting on the front lines, fighting this every step of the way. This is critical conversation to have. This is why I'm happy to introduce our moderator for our plenary, Let Freedom Read. He's an award-winning journalist, host of Velshi, and chief correspondent for MSNBC, and weekly economics contributor to NPR's Here and Now. He has reported extensively from Ukraine and across Central and Eastern Europe during the Russian invasion, as well as covered COVID-19 pandemic and the killing of George Floyd here at home. He is known for his immersive on-the-ground reporting, hosts Velshi Banned Book Club on MSNBC and Velshi Banned Book Club podcast. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Ali Velshi.
Thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome. This is not a circumstance where I should be getting the applause. It's you who are doing the hard work. I only do what I'm supposed to as a journalist. I bear witness to it, and I hold power to account for doing it. So thank you for all you do. Thanks to PFLAG for all it is doing. And when I say it, it's an organization, but it's an organization of people around this country who have been doing remarkable things. Brian, thank you for your warm words of introduction, and welcome to Let Freedom Read. I am so deeply honored to be invited here, but I'm very lucky to be here. I spent my last couple of weeks in Israel on the Gaza border, and I wasn't sure I was going to make it. It's a weird world when discussing book bans is your amuse-bouche between the things that you do. But it's a key part of my work. It became a key part of my work almost 2 years ago, and my team started this sort of fringe idea called the Velshi Banned Book Club, largely because, you know, as a TV host, you have such pressure to book guests that this became the easiest thing in the world, right? Every week somebody would ban another author, and it's like, hey, you want to come on TV? And they're like, yeah, sure. So it became a sort of an easy to book segment. And we soon realized, though, after you do 4 segments on banned books, you've exhausted all the reasons why people ban books. And it's for all of history, right? There's nothing new in the way this goes. And so what this evolved into was a real celebration of books and authors and people and ideas. It wasn't about why'd your book get banned, because that takes 30 seconds and we can have that conversation and we all know the reasons for it. But then we started realizing what people miss when they don't read these books. And all over the country, you see bookstores that have banned book sections, and every author that comes on, their book sales go up. So it's a great little middle finger. But there's a real reason for this, and that is so that we can provide an honest and inclusive education for the next generation, especially of LGBTQ plus youth and youth of color. Diverse books allow young people the access to the information they need to learn about themselves and the world around them. And boy, do we need that right now. We need that so badly. So our signal, thank you, our slogan is reading as resistance. The silver lining to this is the resistance that it has brought about. In a world in which you feel disempowered and you're not sure how you deal with the craziness in the world around you, we actually have ways to deal with this. We know it gets people out there. The simplest thing you do is you can read the book. You can make sure your library has the book. You can make sure that you purchase that book if you want to, or purchase it for someone else, or you can get involved with your parents' association or the local library, or you can go to your school board meetings, or you can go to your city council meetings. You can make sure you vote. You can make sure you're registered to vote. There's so much we can do. We don't have to be victims of this. So our panelists today, and I want to get right to it, are leaders in the concept of resistance against book bans. As authors, as organizers, and as librarians, they work to bring diverse books onto our bookshelves. They are experts on individual, local, and systemic ways that we can fight those nationwide book bans. And I want to introduce them to you right now. What a remarkable, august panel we've got, starting with Emily Drabinski. And I'll ask Emily to come forward. Emily Drabinski is an associate professor at the Queens College of Graduate School of Library and Information Science Studies in Queens, New York. I got that entirely wrong, but she's a librarian extraordinaire. She's the current president of the American Library Association that has been at this game for a very long time. She edits the book series Gender and Sexuality in Information Studies and organized a biannual colloquium series that expanded research in the area. She was the 2020 recipient of the Association of College and Research Libraries Award for Career Achievement Awards from its Women and Gender Studies section in recognition of this work. Arvin Ahmadi is the author of Dawn and Across. Arvin, you can come up to the stage. Girl Gone Viral and How It All Blew Up. He graduated from Columbia University, worked in the tech industry prior to becoming a full-time writer. When he is not reading or writing books, he can be found watching late-night talk show interviews and editing Wikipedia pages. He lives in Los Angeles. I want to welcome Julie Womack. Julie, come on up. Julie is the head of organizing for Red, Wine, and Blue. Apparently you've heard of it. A community of over 500,000 suburban women who use digital media and friend-to-friend organizing to fight disinformation and to win campaigns. She's a former prosecutor who specialized in domestic violence and abuse cases. She practiced as an assistant city attorney for the city of Columbus, Ohio, where she handled both state and federal litigation, the folks from Ohio over there. After the 2016 election, she jumped into local organizing in blue trending conservative suburbs, her blue trending conservative suburb, to help start several women-led grassroots organizations and a political action committee. That led her to her current position with Red, Wine, and Blue. She resides north of Cincinnati. She's the mom of 3. I am really thrilled to talk to you all. Let's get right to it. Friends, thank you for being here. We've had a good amount of time to get to know one another. And it's so interesting that you can look at this book banning thing and think this is a really dark time in our history. But in truth, this has been around for all of history since the first word was printed. And you really do look at it as an opportunity. You sort of think that there's hope in all of this because it has activated people. And frankly, it's getting more people to read books, and it's getting them to learn things about other people. People who aren't even activists necessarily. They're just like, hey, why'd you ban that book? Let me read it.
100%. So, okay, I was getting a microphone coming back at me. Yeah, 100%. So I know what's happening is that, there are these people out there trying to be divisive, trying to scare people. It's a political agenda, right? They are trying to push a political agenda through our schools, using our children. And the thing that I've been seeing that does give me hope is that there's a backlash to it. People, when they learn about it, they don't like it. And if you look at the statistics, we are the majority. Like, there's a very loud but vocal minority out there that is doing this. And when people in our community hear about book banning, hear about attacks on LGBTQ students in their schools, they do not like it. But what we need to do is we need to make sure we are using our voices and sharing these stories because, people are busy and they run around doing their daily lives things and they're not paying attention to all of that. But you all can make a difference by using your voices, by standing up, by bringing people to your school boards to share stories, and that will change communities.
Arvin, one of the things that's most interesting in our book club when we read these books is we are literally talking to people whose lived experiences so different from ours sometimes that we wouldn't seek those books out necessarily. And now there are people who make their entire reading decisions on what got banned or what's on my banned book club, which is achieving this interesting thing where I may not have been seeking out a book on your life experience, and now I'm going to read it because somebody didn't want me to. Tell me about that as a writer.
Well, as a writer, it's still, it's having your book banned is not a badge of honor, and yet it's no coincidence that almost all of the books on these lists are books about people's gender identities or sexualities or race, ethnicity, background. They're about authentic experiences, we write these books, and these books are getting published because they mean something to us as authors, and we know they would have meant something to us as kids looking for books that reflect us. They're getting published now because the culture has changed, publishing is an industry, and at the end of the day, readers have demanded those books, and publishing is finally responding to them. But because those books are now out there, and because like Generation Z especially is seen as the authenticity generation, a no BS generation, I think a lot of gatekeepers and people in this country, I do believe a minority, but a very loud minority, feels threatened by this authenticity, this openness, the spreading of this authenticity and openness, and how they believe it might change their kids in some kind of a dangerous way, that they want these books banned. You look at a lot of these lists of book bans. Just yesterday, I was looking at one, cleanupalabama.com/books. A lot of the reasons, which already just the fact that that's categorizing these books as dirty, 101 books listed there. A lot of them were, the reason listed was alternate sexualities or alternate sexual identities. So it's a fear of other ideas and other people, which is just, that's terrifying to me, that we are now afraid of opening our kids up to other ideas and other people. And so I think it does embolden other authors like myself and readers to speak out on it, but it's also tiring.
It's not what you were looking for.
It's
not why you
not
got
what
into
you were
it.
looking
Yeah.
for.
No.
Yeah, it is tiring, and I guess that's part of why the flip side of this is the people who read the books and read the language and ask about the vehicles that you used and why you chose that. And Emily, that brings me to you, in that every book that's banned wasn't some work of revolution. It was somebody just writing their words or their truth, or
somebody writing a story about who they are.
yeah.
And, you know, I think for those of us in the LGBTQ plus community, we read to come to understand ourselves, right? Like, how many of you read a book and were like, I look just like the character in Dykes to Watch Out For. I guess I guess I must be, right? So we come to our identities through reading and through language, and that's what I think is part of what they're trying to crush. Yeah.
I'm totally going to get a shirt that says Dykes to Watch Out For. Look at the puzzling reaction on people's faces as I walk by. Let's talk about libraries and librarians. I have never, prior to the last year and a half, known anything about librarians other than the fact that they get awards and everybody likes them and they're fantastic. I don't know that they chose to get enlisted in some kind of a battle, but they're on the front lines of this thing.
Absolutely. I just flew in this morning from Florida, where I was attending our American Association of School Librarians conference. And the library workers in Florida, who have as their whole job, right, to find a book and put it in the hands of a kid to read it. Like, that's what we do. We connect people to stories. That's what we got in the line of work to do. Every single one of those people is working under extraordinarily challenging circumstances, having to think about whether they are compliant with the law when they want to give a book to a kid. It's absurd, right? Because if I said to you, what we do for a living is put a book in the hands of a child, you can't be against it. There's no way to be opposed to it, right? And so it was incredibly moving to be there and to see the school librarians of Florida. They all got up on the stage en masse for a photo op, and it was like seeing people who'd been through a kind of war and who are continuing to be in a kind of war, and really inspirational and moving to see how much we're committed to that work. And, you know, in many ways, it is nice I've spent my entire career with people telling me libraries were over. The internet, we don't need libraries at all. And so in this moment, to see so many people learning about what we do and the incredible power that we have to connect people to the stories that make them who they are, that's the one bright spot for me in this.
And I just want to, every thread of this conversation is worth pulling on some more. So it's going to feel a little disjointed, but I just want to know so much more about everything you're doing. Julie, one of the things you said that was really interesting is that when people find out what's going on, they don't like it. Now, you could append anything to that sentence. In fact, we've seen it with abortion across the country, where there are people who it's not about what they think about abortion. It's are you about to take a right away from me? There's this sense amongst people that if you let this go, it's a slippery slope. The state will start making the decisions that you should be making for yourself. And we have certainly seen that example in book bannings, in reproductive rights, in a lot of other places. And there's some fear that goes further if we don't step in and say, stop.
100%. And all of those issues, it is so important that everybody is standing up and using their voices. We just did an event. It was a great event in Pittsburgh with at Penzie Spice. I think there's probably a lot of Penzie Spice fans out here. And it was amazing. And we had a table of banned books out in front of the store, and people were coming in to shop, of course, and running into our banned books. And there were so many people who came up and had no idea that books were being banned in schools near them. This is Pennsylvania, you guys. There's a lot of big book banning going on in Pennsylvania. So the fact that all these people coming into the store had no idea, but they were shocked, and then they were ready to go read more and learn more. And I think you're 100% right, Allie. No matter what the issue is, people do not like the idea of government taking away their rights. They do not like being told what to do for their children, not being able to make decisions for their children. And so it's really important at this time. We see a lot of these parents' rights talk going on, and that's not what it is.
It's a weird talking point, right? Because it sounds like a good bumper sticker.
Right.
But what you're doing is parents are giving the state the right to make decisions about what they and their family consume.
Exactly. And so right now we're running a campaign called Freedom to Parent, because we're pushing back on that narrative. We want to change that framing. Right. We want the freedom to parent our children without being told by the state or a small minority of people what we can and cannot do.
So this is interesting. Excellent work. Emily, not all books are for everybody. And one of the great roles that librarians play, if you're a concerned parent, is to say, hey, my kid likes this or really reacted well to that book. You know, you can curate that. Librarians as curators, as opposed to people who know how to read those crazy numbers and figure out what shelf the book is on.
Well, we do know how to do that.
Yeah.
And that's very important.
It is. It's impressive.
Be able to find a book, but that's not what this talk is.
Right.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about that part of it. That every author I talk to, where I read some comment that some book banner put out about this is inappropriate for my 4-year-old child, and the book, you know, the author will say, I didn't write it for a 4-year-old child. It wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
But for instance, to Arvin's point, there are books about experiences, particularly as it relates to sexuality, that occur younger than some parents would like that to be true. And there are some readers who say, I didn't know people wrote about that. I didn't know that happened to someone else. I didn't know someone else went through that experience. So tell me about the curation role as a librarian, how do you manage that? How do you manage I know what's not appropriate for you, and I know what you might need to read?
So librarians are professionals, right? We have master's degrees, and just like you wouldn't plumb your own house or cut your own hair, or maybe you did during the pandemic, but we'll do that again. You wouldn't build a library collection for the public without having some expertise in that. So we all have master's degrees. You know, it's because if I was building a library just as myself, it would have no sci-fi in it. I don't like sci-fi, right? But we don't do that.
Right.
We, like librarians, are very committed to building collections that have something in it for everyone in your community. And I think part of what happens is people imagine that they know their community, because I know me and my set of friends, and you do, but there's all kinds of people in your community that you don't know. And librarians, it's our job to get to know our community, whether it's the kids in our schools and the curriculum that we're teaching to. In an academic library, I'm thinking about the curriculum, and in a public library, I'm thinking about everybody in the community that changes all the time, and making sure that I have something in the collection for everyone. We use professional review tools. We read book reviews. You've probably seen our youth media awards that come out every year. We are experts in sort of thinking about books and thinking about collections that we build for everybody, not just for the individual reader, not just for me.
That's a good way of thinking about it. I appreciate that. Arvin, one of the things that I often say is that a book is banned either because of the words, the person writing it, or the ideas therein. And it might be all three. And in some cases, it is all three. But in some cases, it's not. Like some of these silly book bans in York, Pennsylvania were just off of a sort of a list to say, hey, why don't you broaden what you read? And they said, oh, well, let's ban everything on that list. Talk to me as a writer, because what I enjoy in my book club is that I'm actually talking to writers about the story, the language, the use of individual words and sentences. That's some of the beauty of this whole thing. There are people getting exposed to discussions about books they weren't going to read and getting immersed in them. And whatever agenda someone was worrying about is fallen into the background. They're just loving the book.
Totally. For better or worse, I think writers are people who are obsessed with depth and with context. And it can be frustrating as a writer sometimes to have to consider every interaction from 7 different angles and possibilities, being like, I could have said that or that. But the way that benefits, I think, books about touchy subjects is that they go deep. They give you so much context about an identity, a grapple, a struggle, things like that. The problem with these book bans is that so often the few people that are bringing them to the attention of school boards and local governments are cherry picking specific lines out of books that have so much more context to them. And I think as a parent, you should be more concerned with, maybe the way that your kids are surfing the internet and looking at so many things, tweets, articles, Instagram stories without context in just a second, versus actually sitting down to read a book, typically 40, 50, 60 plus thousand words, which are so deep and so thoughtful. And so it's really unfair, and I think it's a form of propaganda for these book banners to be taking and cherry picking specific lines without giving the full context. And that, I think, is sort of what's lacking from the conversation, because these are novels, these are books. They just have so much more than the specific lines that are being pulled out. And they do so much more for the readers in terms of, like Emily was saying, what they're looking for and needing.
I just want to go further with that context, because in Florida, for instance, Romeo and Juliet now, in many places, is limited in the way it can be taught. It can only be taught certain things, because it's like, how do you read Romeo and Juliet without knowing the context, right? The whole thing is context. No author says, well, yeah, if you took that one sentence, it might seem like a weird book, but it wasn't. I didn't write a sentence.
Yeah, and that's sort of the society that we're living in today, right? That everything is kind of in hyperspeed, and people are even more maybe enamored by a quick pull quote or a cherry-picked line. I think the society that we're also living in today is part of what's affecting these book bans, where the numbers are in favor of authenticity, and kids, people are more accepting of other identities. People are coming into their identities better. And I think there's this quick knee-jerk fear from parents that, if that a book is going to turn their kids gay, for example. And let me be the first person to tell you, or not the first person to tell you, a book will not turn your kid gay. But it might help them figure out an identity or a thought or a feeling that was already there, or contextualize it, or make them feel less alone. But because the numbers and the culture is moving in the direction that it is, and I think a lot of some parents maybe feel helpless about that or afraid of that, book bans are just an easy thing to come at.
Julie, let's talk about wins on the ground. What kind of things have you done that look like success?
Okay, well, there's a woman who now works for us. Met her at a convention in Virginia a couple months ago. Her school library, there were some members of the community coming in trying to remove books and get the library defunded. Basically, they were, just didn't like anything that was literature for the LGBTQ plus community, so they were pushing back on that. She heard about it. Again, someone told her about it. She started to organize. And I love the picture at the end. They got their board of supervisors to reverse, fully fund the library. They got the books in the library. There's this great picture. And the people who were pushing the book bans are in the front of the picture, kind of looking down. And then there's this group of like 50 people in the back with colors on, all going like this in the meeting. So, that's why I'm saying it's like you need to talk to the people. I mean, you guys have your community here. You guys are organized, but there is a broader community. You need to be talking to all parents. You need to be showing up at your school boards, because if you show up and you use your voice and you talk, the odds are in your favor that you are going to win on this. And if you don't, you just keep fighting and you change your school board.
Okay, literally, as you say, if you stand up, that little dog just stood up, literally. Who'd been sleeping the whole time.
Maybe I'm a little too loud. Sorry about that.
No. Dog's in the fight. Emily, let's talk about that, because I think a lot of people who appreciate or grew up loving their library have no idea what the library needs or can use, or what librarians need or can use, because it's not a system where we give things to our library. So what does support look like? What does saving your library look like?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because I have 800 ideas for
Excellent.
you. The first thing I would say is that everybody can do something, right?
Sure,
And you all know this in the room, but I talk to a lot of people who are like, well, what can we do? And which is why it's so great to be here with you, Julie, because there's so many things you can do. The first thing I would say is make sure you have a library card.
Right.
If you don't have a library card, go get one. If you have a library card, find a friend, bring them to the library, get them a library card. Okay? Because we need to use our public institutions, right? We use them or lose them. And so I think that's really crucial. And then ask your librarian what you can do to support them. Most libraries have a friends group where you can join. We need people who care about libraries and who love libraries to be part of the governing bodies of their libraries. So if you have capacity to run for the library board, that's amazing. Make sure, you know, in the ALA, this is like all we do all day, right? I didn't think when I ran for president that what I would be doing is talking about the importance of books, right? And like having access to books. But in the context where in the first 9 months of this year, we saw more than 600 attempts to censor library materials, addressing 1,915 books, a 20% increase in book bans over the same period last year, shifting from the school library to the public library. Last year, there was just mostly a part of the school library picture, but now it's split half and half between school and public. So where they were coming for school libraries, they're coming for public libraries now. And so go into your public library, being a part of it, and make sure that we are running a campaign ourselves called Unite Against Book Bans. If you go to uniteagainstbookbans.org and sign up, that is what the tool we are using to mobilize people on the ground when we hear of particular and like parts of the country that are needing help. Most recently, a school district in Carroll County, Maryland, we were able to use our campaign platform to get people organized and mobilized around that. So I encourage you, if you haven't already, to go to uniteagainstbookbans.org and join our campaign.
Can I say something about library boards? What Emily just said about library boards made me think about this. You guys, I don't know if you understand this, or you probably do. I know you all do. You're dialed into politics, but elections are coming up pretty soon. And there's a lot of library boards that are on the ballot, and people do not pay attention to those kind of
They
small
don't make
elections.
it down a list.
But it's really important.
Yeah.
So you need to look to make sure who is your library board up for election, and maybe the mayor in your town actually controls the library board. Like, figure out who actually controls those, and then make sure you're telling everybody, because you tell a couple of friends, these local elections can be won by a couple of votes sometimes. So you can actually make a huge difference. So just something to pay attention to.
Yeah, you're not kidding about that, because in the case of lower down positions on a ballot, any funding by some group, somebody gives you $1,000, that means you've got signs, which means when somebody walks into that voting booth and they've seen your name, that's who gets the election. It is the sort of the smallest thing you can do, but it can have outsized impact.
Yes, in case you all have never heard of the term relational organizing, it's basically friend-to-friend organizing, and it just means you talk to your people. So before November 7th, you need to be, everybody in your phone, in your state, in your city, needs to be hearing from you about who they should be voting for, who are the good candidates. Like Ali said, these local elections, a lot of people don't know who these candidates are, and maybe they know the name because their kid played sports with this parent, but they have no idea that this parent is, pretty extreme in their views. They just know their name from something. So it's really important to inform your friends.
Arvin, one of the things that's interesting is that, going back to the reproductive rights stuff, it didn't matter what state and what their politics were. Every time there was a ballot question about restricting reproductive rights, it was defeated, or whatever. The side that wanted to restrict reproductive rights was defeated because it got beyond being partisan. Now, look, obviously there's a partisan aspect to what's going on, but really, as a writer, your view is, I assume, that no, this should not be about political parties. Everybody should be against book banning.
Yeah, I mean, writers, I think one thing writers and young people today have in common is that we're both idealists. I think something that we talk about all the time as writers, creatives, artists is keeping that kid inside of you alive. And so I think it's the same thing, where if you bring the idea of book bans to the attention of teenagers, especially today, they're appalled that it's happening. I mean, that's why so many children's book authors I know are now becoming political, becoming involved. There are even organizations of kid-lit authors. You made the point of small amounts of money making a big difference at a state and local level. Kid-lit authors are now involved in that fight because we see that too. And we know that the kids that we are writing for, who we care about what's going on in this country. And that's an easy way to make an impact. And so on the book ban front, it's the exact same thing, where if you bring the attention to them, they know that one of the greatest things about growing up in this country is the freedom to read what you want, be who you are. It's that freedom. And it's like Dr. Biden said, we don't ban books in America. It's as simple as that.
Right.
And so the kids are on our side. I think readers are on our side. Most Americans are on our side if they know about what's going on. The problem is that a lot of it is happening behind closed doors or just, in a hush hush sort of setting.
Yeah, well, that's why you got to get inside those closed doors.
Yeah.
Emily, the first book, it's not the first book I featured because the writer of the Bible is not with us, but the Tyndale Bible in English was sort of offended everyone's sensibilities because it caused people who read English to be able to read the Bible on their own and skip the clergy. But generally, when we think about banned books in history, we think about big things like that, pieces of literature. And one of the neat things in the last 2 years is the number of books I've focused on that are kid lit, what we used to call chick lit, graphic novels, things that you can't imagine why they'd be banned, but that we are exposing ourselves because some dumb county somewhere put it on a list, and now I get to discuss this interesting book that you weren't actually going to read in the first place, and now you're going to. Now you're going to get involved in it because someone brought it to your attention. I think the upside of this book banning is my to read list has become, it's 5 times as long as it ever was.
Right. I mean, I think about for how many years there weren't any LGBTQ plus stories at all. Right? There are many ways to ban a book. And so we finally come to the point in our history where we have access to those stories. Like, I came out in 1994. I didn't know a single trans person in my life. And I had met one lesbian who worked at the antique store up on Fairview Avenue in Boise, Idaho. Like, that's it. And I have a 15-year-old.
Totally sounds like a made up story, but yeah, I
it's completely true. And my 15-year-old had trans kids in his 2nd grade classroom.
Right.
And so the openness to story and the openness to ways of being and the profusion of ways to like flourish as ourselves, it's like unlike anything I could have imagined growing up. And so I think like I try to hang on to that we're seeing this crisis right now, this attack, because of the amount of progress we've made.
So Arvin made a similar point. I mean, do you think net we're doing better? We're getting better? More
I mean, it's hard, right? It's hard. Like, just, Senate Bill 150 just passed in Kentucky, and it changes the way that you can teach about gender and sexuality in schools. And for librarians having to deal with that, they've already seen hundreds of books being removed from the shelves of school libraries in Kentucky. And so that's not better, right? Like, that's not a better situation.
Right.
So I guess I would say, like, even though it is growing our reading lists, it's making it harder and harder for people on the ground to get books in the hands of kids who need them.
Because I think about social media too here, where it's, because when I was a kid, the way that I discovered books was the Newbery list and whatever books were featured in my school library. Today, kids have social media, and so maybe a book is getting banned or lots of books that speak to you are getting banned. You learned about it on social media. But I'm still thinking about those kids who maybe even their access to social media is limited or cut off. So they still just have the Newbery list and the books being featured at their library. So yes, maybe you and I are discovering books we might not have discovered from the banned books list, or maybe some social media savvy teenagers are finding those books. But I still feel for those kids who the library is their main point of access.
And it's about more than books. So the Human Rights Campaign, they put out a study recently, 60% of trans and gender variant kids report feeling unsafe at school. 90% report feeling safe in their school library. So it's not just the books, it's the space and that we make for our most vulnerable students.
Julie, we've started to enumerate ways in which people can get involved and change things. Tell me a little bit more about what that looks like to you. Do you hear from people who say, I want to become a little bit of an activist? This might be the entry point. Tell me how this works.
Yep, we call ourselves the non-threatening on-ramp to politics. So, I see parents who maybe have a child who's come out as gay or lesbian or trans, and they're seeing policies at their school that they do not like. So they're trying to figure out how they can be activated. They don't like the book bans going on in their community. And so they're looking for ways to get involved. And so there are resources out there. Red, White, and Blue has a ton of resources and trainings on how to do that. You just start with finding your people in your community who feel like you, who do not inform them. They do not like these book bans. And then you get them together. You have meetings. You start showing up at your school board. You start making sure people are speaking. You make sure that people on social media are sharing about these. Again, informing your community. A lot of people in your community do not know this is happening. So it is just about getting yourself organized, and you do not have to be a political operative or experienced to do this. It is more authentic when you are sharing your real life experiences, just showing up as yourself, and the power of bringing your community together. Like I said, Virginia saved a whole library that probably would have been defunded if nobody had stepped up. So you have the power to make these changes. You just got to find your people and start showing up and start speaking out.
Emily, what do you make of, we have, my banned book list is fairly well curated, and there's all these banned book shelves at bookstores, but all books are not all that interesting. And there's a lot of stuff out there that you defend because you're defending a principle, not every book.
Yeah, absolutely. We're defending a principle that we all have the right to the sovereignty of our own minds and selves.
Right. It's about you, the consumer, the reader, not necessarily the author.
And for librarians, like, we want something for everybody. Like,
Right.
I don't know why anyone reads Dune. Too long, too boring. Movie's bad. But I'm committed.
But you will defend its right to be on your bookshelf.
Absolutely, every time, because we want everybody to come into the library.
How far does
and
that
find
go
something
when there's hate in books?
How far does it go when there's hate in books?
Like how far are you comfortable defending a book being on a shelf in a library?
So what I love about working in a library is that there's nothing abstract about it. It's extremely material. So if you ask me that question, like up here,
Right.
I don't know.
But if I ask you about a book, if I give you this book, you'll know how to answer it.
Well, I'll know how to answer it in relation to the community for whom I'm building the collection. Like,
Right.
we do all of our work relationally and in conversation with the community, and we have, the books that we select are books for the people who live where we are. And what's interesting too about the sort of banned books mishigas, if you will, is that we are used to people having questions about the books we have in our collections. That's a very common thing that happens in libraries. We want people to have an interest in their public institutions and to demand more of them, frankly. And so we have processes that are in place in every library so if you have a problem with a book, we review it. There's a whole process, a challenge policy. So most
and
libraries
always
have
has
this.
been. That's important.
This is standard practice in any library. And so what's different now is that where you might have you might say this book has hateful language in it, and I don't know if it should be in the school. And we would have a conversation about that with the community. What we're seeing now is books that are challenged 100 at a time by people who haven't read them, by people who...
And you're getting form letters and...
Yeah, and it's just, it's not about, it's clearly not about an authentic interest in building a collection with something for everyone.
Right.
That sometimes we do choose a book and decide it's not in the right place and we move it, or we decide we don't want it in the collection. That's normal standard library practice and has been for the 147 years that the American Library Association has been doing its work.
So this is very interesting, Arvin, because there are books, we always solicit from our viewers their view on it. And people will say, with regard to Huck Finn or To Kill a Mockingbird, or even some of Toni Morrison's stuff, that the matter inside and the language used is the kind of thing that some people will find offensive. And that's everybody's right to find something offensive. And we have good discussions with people. In some of those cases, the authors are not available, but we have experts who come and discuss it and say, yes. But to your point, it's the context in which the book is set, the time in which it was written, all of which is relevant to the critical mind.
The time in which it's read, too. So my absolute favorite book in the world is The Catcher in the Rye. And I read it in high school and it spoke to me, and I reread it every year or two.
Wow.
And my views on this book always change, because now I find Holden, a little bit grating, has a couple of offensive views here and there, and yet it's that voice and sort of like yearning to discover his, yearning for adventure and the truth, and something about him that clings to me. But I think because I read it every couple of years, I recontextualize the book, the language, the interactions, all of that. But that's sort of the beauty of a book, is that it also changes with you and with the times. And you can have that conversation. I mean, that's the beauty of English teachers and reading books growing up in a classroom setting, is you have those conversations, you have them respectfully, you have them in the context of what's going on in the world and how the culture has changed since that moment that book was written. In this case, a book that was written in the early 50s. And so,
context is critical.
Context is critical. Context is what books are all about. Not every book by a gay author is going to be the same. Not every book by a Black author, a Latinx author, whoever is going to be the same, because they are written in the specific context of that book's universe and that author's experiences. And that's why I think we need to keep letting kids read widely, because it gives them that context, it gives them empathy, it gives them critical thinking skills to think with nuance. Nuance is the whole name of the game in books.
Julie, some people have framed this discussion as some kind of an urban liberal elite versus real Americans, or, you know, things like that. Who are the people you talk to, and how do they see it?
Well, I work in the suburbs, so it's definitely not, you know, the big cities. And what we know is that this is happening in a lot of areas that we are doing work in, because these areas are diversifying. They are becoming a little bit more progressive, and that is a political threat. So what you see is, like I said, this is very much a very coordinated, you know, well-funded effort to cause chaos in our schools, because they want to defund public education, and kids are basically become political pawns in, you know, in this agenda. And so by sowing distrust, because come on, we love our public schools, okay? Most people across the country love their public schools. So if you want to defund a beloved institution, then you need to build some distrust. You need to suddenly have teachers and librarians be the enemy. Like, that's just unbelievable. But you have to build, you know, you have to do it that way. And so I think that's why you see a lot of these things happening in communities that are a little bit more turning from red to purple or purple to blue. It's very much a political tactic that is driving all of this.
Emily, do you think people sort of get the degree to which this is a funded, organized effort? Because a lot of these challenges that you talk about look like they just come from concerned parents.
Oh, I don't know if it looks like that to the librarians receiving this challenge.
But to the public out there that you'd like to help, to have rally around you, do you think everybody's clear on this?
I don't know if everyone's clear on that.
I asked that as a
think
journalist who covers
I think
it.
your analysis is spot on, that it is about sowing distrust in public institutions. I completely agree with you. And I think that for most people, the library is a trusted institution, the librarian is a trusted figure, and it's a hard sell, right? Because you brought your kids there and you got 50 picture books, and you would never have been able to afford 50 picture books, so it's like impossible. So I think when people hear that this is happening in their communities, they're baffled, because it just doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But do they know how well funded it is? I think that's a kind of harder story to tell, which is why we talk a lot at ALA about the numbers of challenges. Like when you say this is like 100 books and it's the same 100 books from library to library to library, city to city to city. So there's I'm from Idaho, so I pay attention to, are there any Idahoans here? Okay, I pay a lot of attention to Idaho, so I'll call them and tell them I gotta be here next year. But Kimber Glidden was the library director in Boundary County, Idaho, and she received a challenge on 400 individual titles in her library.
Wow.
How many of those 400 books do you think she had in her library collection? 0, exactly right. 0 of those titles. So, you know, those are the kinds of stories that I think make it very, very clear.
Right.
And of course,
So this is not a good faith effort.
It's not a good faith effort at all. Yeah.
That's wild. That stumped me. I forgot my next
they-
question. That was like, because I thought you were making up a county again.
But let me tell you what happened to Kimber. She and her staff were followed by armed extremists. They occupied the board meetings. It was completely unsafe.
Wow.
At one point, they couldn't get insurance on the building. Right? Extremely painful. She no longer works at the library. I just listened to her on a podcast this week. Her new job is working in an emergency room, and she said that was a lot less stressful than working at the library.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you go from, and I mean this with the deepest of respect for ALA, what was to most people a benign organization for a long time, meaning it existed, but it wasn't, people didn't know the mechanics of how it fit into their lives, right?
Should have. It's a great.
A lesson we have learned. but we didn't, and now you are literally in the middle of it all the time.
Mhm.
Are you and the organization built for that? And how do you do it to avoid, okay, I can see the look on your face. That's all the answer I needed.
Are we built for that? We are built for that. Like I said, 147 years old. We've been fighting for the right to read the whole time. The whole time. Yeah.
All right, you're in the fight.
I gotta say something. So part of my job is to do outreach and talk to people on the front lines. I've talked to lots of teachers. I've talked to lots of librarians. You guys, librarians need to have like superhero capes. They are bad asses. They are standing up for like, some of that horrible stuff. But I mean, they are standing up for kids. They are standing up for families. And, maybe you're trained for it. That's great. I mean, but I don't think that was probably in the job description.
Not
when
at
they
all.
signed up,
Right.
so.
Not at all. But what was in the job description was like cultivating community
Mhm.
and making sure that like we solve problems.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Like among all of my accolades, what I'm really best at is fixing the stapler when it's jammed. Right. And this is because you have to figure out how to solve that problem if you're going to work in a library. So we're
Right.
very good at solving problems. Do we wish that this was not happening? Absolutely. But we all do. Right. That's
Yeah.
something we all share.
Arvin, what does this portend for the future? You made an interesting point that social media and acceptance and young people have probably pushed this thing because they want more information. They're craving it. It's available to them. What happens next? Do you think that because that demand is not going to go away, despite people banning books about gay penguins in Oklahoma or something, like it's not actually going to change anything? Do you think that the demand just continues to solve this problem?
I mean, I think on the author and writer side, it just means that we are closer with our readers. We're listening to them. We're interacting with them more, both at festivals and school visits, but also online, on TikTok, on Instagram, because I think they're also puzzled and frankly angered when they do learn about these book bans. But to know that the authors of the books that they want to read, that they want access to, are also on their side means a lot to them. And for us to know that they care too about their access means a lot to us and emboldens us to keep writing these books and pouring our identities and the real identities that we see in the world in these books. So, I mean, at the most basic level, all we can do is continue writing these books and allow just enough of this information and what's going on in the world to get online, be involved, but not let it kind of become the whole thing, not let it stop us from producing.
And I don't know, I've not met a lot of authors. I mean, clearly authors have become activists in this thing, but both authors want to write their books.
Yeah.
And they want people to read their books. They're not, it's like librarians. They weren't looking for this extra side fight.
Yeah. But I think children's book authors, I'm a young adult author, I think we do see ourselves as involved in this fight, just because our audience, it's different. Our books are meant to be read by young people and old people alike, but young people are such idealists, and I think we just feel we feel like we owe them the acknowledgement of what's going on, and maybe speaking out on it or doing something about it instead of just writing the books. Writing the books is our job. That's what we love to do. That's what we came to this job for. But there's something about writing for young people where you just can't stand by and watch them having these like empathy delivery devices that they love get stripped away and have their access to those things limited.
By the way, I knew that there was some rough understanding that someone was going to give me time cues here, but these lights are impossible. I can't see any of you. So I'm good to go for another couple hours unless anybody has any directions for me. Stand near that dog.
5 minutes.
I'm paying a lot of attention to the dog. Okay, there we go. There we go. I see. Thank you. All right, Emily, I do want to ask you, because we've sort of touched on this a couple times, about who's affected by this. Arvin made a really good point that I'm not affected by a book ban, generally speaking, because I get the books from the publishers and then it comes right to me.
That's nice.
But who is actually affected by this? And I mean this in two ways. One is, what does the actual removal of access to a book mean for somebody who otherwise wouldn't be buying that book or reading it? And what does it mean to a family or a kid who goes to a library seeking information about books that a librarian may now not be able to offer them.
Yeah, I mean, it like the people who come to the library looking for anything, when they can't find it, it is crushing to that person. But I think it also rips a hole out of the community. And we're seeing that with the fights around the library, the way that it's sort of ripping communities apart. Like I get a lot of like online hate because I'm a librarian right now, which is absurd, but it's a reality for me. But in a lot of communities, the librarian is getting attacked by people that they grew up with, that they go to church with. That was their teacher, their kid is in that school classroom. And so it really is ripping apart communities. They're using this sort of book ban as a way to sort of be really destructive around that. But I think, you know, most of us can't afford to just buy every book that we want. And the library is the space where you can go and find those books. It's like built for the public, and it's built for the public good. And it's, you know, that is what we do as libraries. And so I think it sort of, the impact it has on communities is, I think we talk about it less. But the individual reader, of course, we can't know what we don't know.
Right, it's a negative.
It's not like I had.
It's erasure, right? That's the issue.
I didn't have a bunch of books about being queer in my library because they didn't really exist in published form.
So the danger is that a whole bunch of kids today may not have access to those books,
Yeah.
even though they exist.
And I wish that I had known who I was a little earlier. I wish I'd had a sense of a world outside of myself that included me. And so to have that removed from people's access, I mean, I know what that was like. I don't want that for the people growing up today.
It makes for a much smoother transition into adulthood.
Yeah. Yeah.
You are who you are, and you'll become the adult that you're meant to become eventually anyway. It's just a matter of, why are we trying to cut these kids off during those pivotal childhood years where they're exploring, they're looking outward, they're looking inward, they're learning about themselves? Why are we trying to limit their access to things that they can use to learn about themselves? So it's
Yeah.
sad. It makes it harder.
Yeah.
I can sit and talk to you guys literally for a few hours, but having mentioned that thing about timing, I then got the timing cue. So I do have to, I have to wrap this up, but I don't want to. I'm so deeply grateful to you all for a fight I don't know that you were all looking for, but you're in, and we're all in. And thank you for the ideas you've given us and the insight you've given us. Thank you to all of you for the you know, you're all in it. You're all in it. We're all in this one. And I leave thinking that ultimately wisdom will prevail, and it'll be okay. But it's not going to be okay until we're finished fighting for it. So, as I like to say, reading is resistance. Thank you.
Thank you.